All right, so this is joint work with my great colleagues from IOG, Matthias Fitzi, Agalos Kayas, Yoros Parnakiatakos, and Alexander Russell. And I've structured this talk into two parts. The first part, we're going to talk about sort of a new and more realistic model for analyzing high-throughput blockchains. And then the second part of the talk will be about the protocol that achieves high throughput in this model. All right, so let's start with the model part. I should recall that any blockchain protocol that you might encounter, it has roughly two important components. One is the consensus layer. That's where you're doing the agreement on an ever-growing ledger. And then there is another part that kind of almost never gets enough attention, at least until recently. Your case has the same opinion. So that's the communication layer, and the communication layer is responsible for disseminating the messages for the consensus layer. So think blocks. You have to send these blocks around, and so it's important that we also devote some attention to the communication layer. In theory, you have two choices for communication layer. One is point-to-point, the kind of the MPC model, where you assume any two participants have a dedicated channel that connects them. But if you want to do something practical, and especially if you care about high throughput, this is not a good model, because you kind of, if your link capacity is C, you lose this factor of number of participants, because you necessarily got to send every message to n participants. So in practice and for this talk, we're just going to do gossip, and here this limitation is much less stringent. It's just the link capacity divided by the degree, so the degree is the number of nodes that you're connected to. And maybe you can even do something smarter, but we're gonna assume that this is kind of what we do. So in what follows, when we're trying to come up with a new model for analyzing high throughput blockchains, we're going to assume that there's some kind of underlying gossip network, and that will inspire the model to justify the choices we make. All right. Before we talk about the new model, maybe it's a good idea to do a little trip down memory lane and look at the most popular models that we have seen in the past. And by far, the most popular model is the delta delay model, where basically all messages are delivered within delta. And it's beautiful because it really lets you focus on the analysis of your consensus protocol. It's not so beautiful in that it's very unrealistic, especially when you want to do analysis of high throughput blockchains. Because basically it assumes that the bandwidth is infinite. Because this guarantee holds no matter how many messages you send. So not a very realistic model. You can kind of improve it a little bit. This was done in the Prism paper. So you set the delay delta to the time it takes for a block to be sent. So the block size divided by the capacity plus some delay that's imposed on us by the speed of light. And then, importantly, you pick the protocol parameters in such a way that you don't overwhelm the network, right? So the block rate f times the block size is going to be less than the capacity, and then everything should be nice. One problem here with this is that something that we like to call old message bursts. So this is the adversary has a bunch of blocks that they keep to themselves until some later point, and then they release them all at once. If you're already operating at peak capacity, these blocks are going to somehow, clog up your network, and you have to do something about it. And so it's not part of this model. The other thing that's not part of this model is like equivocations. So when you do proof of stake, the adversary for a particular lottery, he can create multiple blocks. You can 2, 3, 1,000, whatever, and try to send them around. So whatever model you have somehow should reflect this. There's a newer model with Joachim, and I'm always very bad at remembering the author's papers, so please forgive me. So this is the repository model, where basically if you want to send a block, the block has two parts, so the header part and the body. The body is the big part, the header has some information like the lottery ticket. So this model kind of assumes the headers, since they're small, they're going to be delivered within delta. And the bodies, you have to download them, and you have to pick which bodies you want to download. So once you have a header, you can say to the network functionality, I'd like to have a body that corresponds to this header, and then you can download the body, but there's a limitation, of course. And so this is how the capacity is modeled. So this rate limit is downloads. So also here, sort of the header equivocations, the fact that the adversary can create multiple headers for the same lottery ticket, that's not part of the model. And there is another small technicality that I'm just going to brush over now. So, and I'd like to talk about this header equivocation in a little bit more detail. So this is your gossip network. So these parties are somehow connected. And what the adversary can do if he wins the lottery, he can introduce into the system headers for two different headers. This is for the same lottery ticket. So this is an equivocation. And since he can also do 1,000 different headers. So we have, whenever you implement communication program in practice, you're going to have to do something to deal with this. And the sort of straightforward thing that you might think of is, well, I'm just going to prefer whichever header I see first. And so if I'm node A and node B comes to me and says, oh, here is for lottery ticket, MID, message ID, whatever. Here's header H. I'm going to say, okay, this is going to be my preferred header for this message ID for this lottery ticket. And if afterwards C comes to me and says, oh, I know of a different header for this lottery ticket, you're just going to say, oh, thanks, I already have one. But you're going to remember this as a proof of equivocation, right? Because you can now clearly prove that whoever won this lottery ticket created two different headers. All right. So and then importantly, you will never download a body that isn't for your preferred header. Right? So you will never go to C and tell me, oh, C, do you have the body for this H prime yet? Because that's not your preferred header. If yes,
would two different headers only occur because of misbehavior, or can there be like benign reasons for there to be two different headers?
This is really just whenever there's misbehavior. Okay, so the point is that you can end up in a situation like this, where half of the network prefers one message, the other half of the network prefers another message, and the question is, is this bad? And the answer is, well, it's not bad if we make sure that the messages like that are not ultimately going to matter to us. Okay, so we're going to use these proofs of equivocation to sort of exclude messages whenever SMS is reading blocks from the protocol. Okay. Any questions? Yes.
Why would I have a preferred block if I know that there's an equivocation and just not prefer any of it?
It's not. I mean, it's a good question. You might also as well not. You might as well decide not to download the block copy at all. That's fine. Okay. All right, so we can summarize the model like this. So for honest messages, we always get delivery of header and body. For equivocated messages, if we end up in this split situation, there will be a proof of equivocation. And we give no guarantees for the bodies. Yes, that's along the line of your question for equivocated messages. It's really strange. There are these super nice screens back there that show me the presentation, but I somehow prefer to look over. I don't know why. Okay, I should also say, how fast do we get delivery? So the headers, since we're now dealing with these equivocations, we can just use the delta delay model for the headers. If the headers are small, whatever, they shouldn't really bother us. So we say all headers are delivered within delta. Of course, if they're from honest parties. And now the bodies is a different story. So the thing you definitely pay is for every hop you have to send the body over the hop, right? So it's the size of the body divided by the capacity of the link plus this speed of light delay. And this you have to do for every hop. And when I say capacity of the link, I guess you have to be a little careful. So this is this issue from before, right? So if your link has capacity C, when we're going to just assume that you're splitting this capacity between all of your neighbors. Now this, one might be able to come up with some smarter way of doing it. Doesn't have this, but we'll leave this for future work. Okay, so this is not the complete picture yet. So there's going to be this mysterious thing plus K. So we're going to pay this plus K penalty. And where does that come from? This we're going to assign priority to messages in some way. We'll see how. And the model basically guarantees you that, your message, the message that you care about, will only get queued behind a higher priority message once. So once per a higher priority message, it might cut in front of you, but then you kind of, you're going lockstep towards your target. And then maybe another higher priority message might cut in front of you, but each higher priority message, it will just delay one time. This is the guarantee of the model. The model gives you, and then you're going to have to work with it. Okay, so I guess at this point would be a good list of questions. Yes.
What's priority?
Yes, so we're gonna. It's gonna be probably change. Depends on the slot number of the block, but yes.
I don't understand why priority will affect your diameter and not the other side of the.
So it's basically, the thing is, if a message cuts in front of you, you're gonna have to wait until that message is sent, and then you're gonna go out.
Yeah, but the diameter of the network is sort of defined by the topology, right? So you're saying that having higher priority messages is like somehow similar to having a higher diameter network. I guess that's the part that's not so clear.
Yeah, they may not be that closely connected. It's just so definitely you have to pay diameter times this thing in the parentheses, right?
Yeah.
And then every time you get stuck, you're gonna have to wait for the message in front of you to be sent. Yeah. So that's you incur the same delay, even though one time it's for yourself and one time it's the amount of time it takes for the other block to be sent.
Okay.
So
Is it because of pipelining? Like you
Yes,
can send your message as soon as you've sent the first K and they're still on the path?
no, already. So the mental picture you should have is so there's some node, right? And your message arrives, and this other message is in front of you. So your message is going to have to wait while this other message is going to go over the link, and then afterwards, the other message is going to go ahead, and you're going to go ahead. Basically, this incurs the delay of the time it takes to send one message to one. I don't know if that helps.
Yeah, I still don't understand it, but that's fine.
All right. So I'm not to explain.
I think a picture would be a serial sort of queues, right? So you only get hit once in the congestion.
Yes.
I think you're not modeling a very complicated network, like a serial queue, I think.
Yeah.
I think that's the picture you're lacking here. I think next time.
So I'll ask you for an animation.
Gotcha.
All right. So if there are no more questions about the model, let's do a little protocol. Here, the main ideas of how you can build a protocol that achieves high throughput in this model. So the actual thing that we're doing is based on a very old idea already. It's called either input endorsers or fruit chains, or I guess also Prism 1.0. So what you have is kind of this thing, the ranking blocks, think of it as a normal Nakamoto chain. But what we're doing is like black box. So it works for anything that gives you an order ledger. But it's, I guess, easier to just be concrete here. And then hopefully Nakamoto won't be here. No, just kidding. And then, so what you do is you have these input blocks. The input blocks actually carry the transactions, right? And then what you do is you reference them by hash from the ranking blocks. And this gives you an order on all the transactions. So the idea looks rather simple. The question is, are we done? And the answer is, well, not quite, because we're operating in this high throughput regime and you're going to have to be really careful. So in particular, you might end up in a situation like this. So this is you, and you receive a block B from somewhere, and it references an input block that you haven't seen yet. So now is the question, well, what are you going to do with it? Option one is, you accept this, but that's not a very good idea. If this block ever makes it into your canonical chain, you'll have a gap in your ledger. So that's not a good idea. The other thing is, well, you consider B undelivered until you have all the references. But the problem is the following: if B is from an honest guy that has seen some input block, but you haven't seen it yet, and it's not clear how long it's going to take for that input block to arrive, since we're doing this high throughput near capacity operation, it's also not a good idea. Okay, so we're going to have to try to deal with this. Okay, and so the first thing we're doing is let's go back to this thing of priorities. So the priority, input blocks are for particular slots. You have a pointer here. So this one is from slot 5, this one is from slot 2, this one is from slot 7. The higher the slot number, the newer the block, right? And we're doing freshest first. So if this is me, I would first download from my peer this in this example the input block with slot number 7. Okay, and then that's also going to be the first one that my other peers see, and they're going to download that. So this is what freshest first delivery is. Now, what does that give us? If an input block is generated by an honest guy, it addresses the network exactly at the slot number, and it might be there might be some interference from legitimate newer input blocks, but we can sort of quantify that. That's what we can do for honest guys. When we have corrupt input blocks, what can happen is they enter the network later than they're supposed to. So then we have to make sure that they don't hurt us. But what we don't have is that the adversary can, collect a bunch of old stuff and then release it in bulk and clog up the network because it has lower priority. This is how we get rid of this. Okay. And then, now let's go back to these missing references. So the way to attack this is we simply certify that input blocks are available, right? So there's some voting involved, and when enough parties have voted for a particular input block, you can create a certificate, and along with the reference, you put the certificates into the ranking chain. Now, if you do this for every input block, it's a lot of overhead. So let's add another level of indirection. So there's a third type of block called endorser block, whose only job is to reference input blocks. And instead of voting for availability of input blocks, we just vote for availability of all the references in a particular endorser block. Okay, and then the thing that actually goes into the ranking chain is the reference to an endorser block along with the certificate. Okay. Again, this looks very nice. And whenever you see this, we're definitely not finished. So, okay, so there's two more problems that we have to deal with. One is if I created this input block here, and this guy is going to create an endorser block, I kind of have to be sure that he sees my input block. And again, it's kind of, there's this freshly first network, so it's not quite clear immediately how long you have to wait before you reference an input block. Or put differently, how far back should the endorser block references go in order to guarantee that we include honest input blocks. Okay. So in order to understand this, let's look at this picture. So I've split up time into slices. And what we're going to ask is, at what point can we guarantee that the red input blocks from this first slice are delivered to everybody? And the tricky thing is, of course, there might be interference from newer input blocks. Okay, especially, so the picture is misleading. They don't all appear at the same time, right? They appear at different times. So there could be a red input block that is created just at the end of this slice. And then its transmission might be hindered by the newer input blocks that come afterwards. But if you think about it, let's say you only use half of the bandwidth. Okay, so then you definitely can guarantee that by this time with arrow points, all the red input blocks will be delivered. Right? Because essentially, in the second slice, you have enough bandwidth to transmit not only the input blocks from that slice, but also the one from the previous one. Okay? If you want to do better than 1/2, well, what about 2/3? Well, you can do 2/3, but then you just have to wait a little bit longer, right? Because the bandwidth you have in slices 2 and 3 is enough for the blocks from slices 2 and 3 plus the red blocks and so on. So you can generalize this to any lambda, right? So that it's a trade-off between sort of the latency and how close you can get to using all of your bandwidth. Right? So basically, whatever parameter lambda you fix, the rule is going to be that endorser blocks from this slice, they reference the endorser blocks from the slice with the red blocks. Okay, so this solves the problem of getting honest input blocks into endorser blocks. Now, unfortunately, there's another thing that can happen. If I'm the guy that creates endorser blocks, I might see an input block here, but the voter will not see it. And so we also have to exclude this. So again, you can do a similar argument that I'm just going to skip, but it turns out that if you do another waiting period and start the voting here, then it works. But unfortunately, the second period will be lambda squared. But lambda is, small values, maybe it's 1 if you want 1/2 of the bandwidth, and 2 if you want 2/3, or whatever. So this is not too bad. All right, and then you can pipeline this. So you can basically start a new pipeline in every slice. All right. Good. Any questions for the last part? Okay. So the last thing is equivocations. Right? So if you remember, we can have this scenario where for a particular lottery for an input block, parties don't have the same view. So some parties prefer the input block with header H, and other parties prefer the input block with header H prime. And I promise you that we're going to deal with it. So let's do it. We deal with it in the voting rule. So essentially, we're going to restrict the voting rule, and we're only going to vote for an EB that references a particular input block if the certain conditions are additionally satisfied. Okay, so here's the timeline. Slot 7 is the slot where this input block is supposed to be diffused. So the header of this input block is supposed to start making its way through the network at slot 7. And then here are a bunch of delta intervals. And the new rule is we only vote for this EB if the IB header for this guy arrived here. We'll see why there's a gap in a second. And if we have seen no proof of equivocation by here. Why does that make sense? Well, it's, I feel a little bad. I was pointing at the other one. Easier to do with this. So if there's a 5 minutes, wow. So if we have where I was, okay, I wanted to explain why this makes sense. So if I've seen the IB header here and no equivocation by here, this means that the whole network has the same view, right? If we had a split situation, given that I saw my header here, my header makes it to everybody by here. If somebody else prefers a different header, they would have had to receive it by here. And by that time, the approval condition would have made it to me. So this kind of guarantees that we won't vote for an endorser block that references an input block that might be problematic. Now we just have to make sure that the voting doesn't mess up our other stuff. So we need another rule for when the guy who creates the endorser block actually references an input block. And so the rule here is first, the IB header needs to be received by here, right? Because when it's received by here, it will definitely be received by here. So this will, the first condition for voting is satisfied, right? So if I'm an honest EB producer, I want people to vote for my block. The question is, which types of IBs do I reference? So if the header for the IB received, if I received it by here, then definitely the voter will see it. And the second is, if I haven't seen a proof of equivocation by here, the voter will not have seen a proof of equivocation by here. So the voter will definitely vote for my block. This is how we deal with equivocations. All right, it's already summary time, so well, all our protocols have Greek names. I don't know why. So again, this whole thing is black box. I did it using Komodo as an example, but it works for anything that gives you an ever-growing ledger. We can get the throughput close to arbitrarily close to 1. Since the last time we saw this, there's an extra exponent. There's a technical reason for this that I didn't go into. So the latency is actually, the trade-off is lambda to the third, and it's secured against it. All right, so this is it.